my concept of progress is not based on any type of external flags. I know where I assume that I want to be, and then I get there and it's somewhere else. You will find something which you did not know you had buried there.
Yes.
Getting that point is like the finest ecstasy I could ever describe.
Our roast name for 135, Robo Celibate, right? So it's like you're just going to keep going. You're not going to get distracted by non-celibacy, right? Which represents all the mess.
The big hormone enneagram.
Hi, I'm John Lukovich, sexual self-pres, golden five wing, 458 trifix.
Hi, I'm David Gray, self-pres sexual 9 with a 1, 974 trifix.
What up? It's Emeka. I'm an 8-wing-7, sexual self-pres with 854 fixes.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I am a self-pres social 3, wing 4, with a 369 trifix. If you like our podcast, guys, make sure you go like and subscribe on the Apple Podcast app. And if you really like us, you should definitely leave us a review.
Welcome to Big Hormone Enneagram. Curl up in your pillow fort and, get cozy. We are doing competency types today. We've already looked at the harmonic triads of the positive outlook types, which are 7, 9, and 2. And we looked at the reactive types 8, 6, and 4. So today we're getting competency. And before we get into it, we wanted to comment on the last episode we did on breath work. Some people had some questions about whether or not we were sharing our friend's story with their consent. And yes, we were. We ran it by her in the episode by her beforehand. And also, that episode was kind of us piecing together what happened after we were tripping. So one of the things that I thought that came to me as I re-listened to it that we didn't say because we were sort of piecing it together in live was one really important aspect of that session. At the very end, she came spontaneously out of her. I am worthy. I deserve to be loved. Something along those lines. And we were, and then everybody in the room was able to say, "You deserve to be loved." And it was sort of became this vivifying quality, and it was almost like taking out the dirt and putting in a new kind of mission statement. And so that was like kind of the crown jewel of the session. So anyway, that was neglected, but I thought that was important to add. If you haven't listened to that session or that episode, go ahead because it's pretty good. So now with us to look at competency types, which are types 1, 3, and 5, we have our friend Jesse Black. Welcome, Jesse.
Hey, what's up?
Do you want to tell people your type or who you are or anything about you or where they want to reach you, where they can reach you if you want them to reach you or not?
Oh, geez, do I want to? No, but I will. What am I? I said this earlier, and I've got to remember what this is. I am a social self-pres 516 with 538 trifix. If you can find me, that's super. You get a gold star. But I'll leave it at that. And I'm interested in how this is going to pan out. So thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
So what we were talking about with the harmonic triads, as they're called, which I believe Don Riso first named. These are strategies that we use in conflict or during to approach problems. And as we discussed in the other episodes, positive outlook needs a kind of almost like a reason to go through what they're going to go through. They need something that's uplifting, something that's transformational, something that is like some reason to stay in the thick of something instead of shutting down. And especially as people were reflecting on positive outlook after that episode aired, people were often talking about how it's almost like they need some kind of hope in a fairly hopeless world. So it doesn't necessarily mean that those types are all positive all the time. It doesn't mean they're all optimists all the time, but there is a kind of a framing things to see something good or worthwhile on the other side. Reactive types in conflict, they need to know your emotional location. They need to know how you're really reacting to things, even if it's not like how you analyze your feelings. They need to know your feelings, where you stand on things, and they do a lot to try to provoke somebody's authentic and genuine reaction. And it's like that gives them data to know how to orient to things, but at the same time, it leads to a fairly just an assumption that the negative thing or the worst thing is probably the true thing. And so they
Mhm.
can get kind of amped up on that. So now we're getting 1, 3, and 5. And does anybody want to jump into what makes a competency type competent?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
Well, I think one of the things we talked about last time was how, I think we mentioned that positive type is the high side, the positive, the
Oh
hopeful
yeah, that's right.
side of things, and then you know, uh, reactive types are like the bottom, the shadow, the negative
Mm,
side of things, and then competency types are neutral. So,
hmm
um, all three of the competency types are trying to look at what the parameters of a situation is, what the rules are, and maybe for like five, for example, trying to understand how to like neutrally what is
mm,
going on here and how do we get to a objectively objective solution or to the problem, but they're not reacting looking at it from rose colored glasses like positive types, and or looking at it negatively like reactive types. They just want to neutrally figure out what the hell's going on and either come to a solution or just understand it.
Yeah, I just was going to reiterate that point that it's kind of attempting a kind of neutrality that's has objectivity as an ideal,
yeah.
something like that.
One of the ways that I've heard distinctions being made between the competency strategies of 1, 3, and 5, like all three types want to know kind of the rules or parameters or the structures, whether it's social structures or interpersonal structures or whatever they're got their attention on. They want to know the rules, and 1 wants to know the rules and follow the rules or make the rules. 3 wants to know the rules and follow the rules when it benefits them, but they're also willing and able to bend the rules when it sees fit, when they sees they can take it, use that to their advantage. And then 5 wants to understand the rules and usually go against what those are, try to reform them, tinker with them, change them, do their own thing, but at least like knowing what is objective and then trying to find their own direction apart from that. And I think that's like I always talk about the complementary seeking novelty, like not novelty, but originality that's like complements the 4 from the heart center. This is in the mental center, the 5s do.
That's a pretty interesting way of putting it, because like as someone who is within it, I don't necessarily think of it that distinctly, like the idea that that I would even be trying to identify rules, because the rules don't apply to me. It's just
Right.
so I wouldn't even use them as rules. They're just sort of like fence posts. And it's like, oh, that's
Yes.
cool that this person has put up a fence. It has nothing to do with me, but that's great that like that's what they think and that's what applies to them. And so I'll just keep walking. But you know,
I think it's like Neo seeing the Matrix, like code at the end of the or whatever, and then wanting to be able to fuck with the bullets or whatever. It's
oh
like I
yeah.
think 5s want to see like the structures, and then they can kind of take it or leave it, but usually leave it.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Nancy, how does it sort of manifest for you? I know it's like coming from a different point, but you were laughing when they mentioned the rule thing.
um, I was laughing because in the narrative training, I was with a group of 3s, and both of them were older than me. They were in their like 40s or something. But one of our realizations towards the end was that none of us feel like rules are made to be followed. All of us feel like we can change the rules when we need to.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know that I'm like constantly looking for the rules, and I get really frustrated. And like that's where a lot of my frustration comes from in my life, is when people aren't clear about rules. I get really annoyed because I'm like,
Mm,
how am I supposed to know if you don't give me the fucking rules? And people would get mad at me for not following the rules, and I'm like, well, I didn't know they were there. Um, So yeah, I spend a lot of my time very frustrated at people for not just being honest. And that got me into a lot of relationship troubles because I would constantly be asking partners what their rules around like me interacting with other guys were. And so they would think I was cheating on them. But I'm
Oh,
not. I'm just looking for parameters.
Mm.
And so they would like never trust me. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing anything. I just need to know. I just need to know. Just tell me.
Yeah, I guess
But
because
yeah.
threes are really trying to zero in on how performance can be measured. Like how do you how do you determine how well one's doing in whatever situation? And to do that, you need some kind of parameters or sort of some way of measuring progress or whatever it is to say, okay, this is good and this is not bad. This is better or worse.
Yes. And one of my pet peeves is when people just sort of use made up parameters, like make them up as they go. Like my econ professor in this term does that. And I email him at least twice a week going, how did you grade this? Why did you grade it like this? Tell me why. Tell me where you took the points off and why. Explain it to me directly. Like,
Oh
and I
my
know he
God.
hates me because of that, but I'm like, you cannot take points off if you don't have a reason, sir. And
I would fucking hate you, just to let you know.
yeah, oh, I know he's made it very clear that he hates me, but I literally
bless.
don't care.
Yeah, well, you shouldn't care because who gives about that clown? He's just some guy.
Oh, and
But,
he
like-
also he loves Putin, just as a side note.
Ugh.
Like, he's a weirdo. So I don't give a
Gross.
fuck what he thinks about me, but he better not grade my paper off of his goddamn emotions.
Oh my God, that's a nightmare. Yeah, imagine that. Yeah, that's a funny one because like I somewhat agree with you on that perspective, and that like I fucking hate it if people are like shifting. I don't really perceive them as rules, but it's like if they're shifting the like context or outline of what has been agreed beforehand, either like verbally or non-verbally, and then all of a sudden it shifts. It's like, what are you doing, motherfucker? Like,
Yeah.
you don't get to do that. However, I get to do that. So it's like it's completely hypocritical. Like I recognize it's really hypocritical, but like, yeah, like I'm the flip reverse in that, like with my students at the beginning of the year, I'm like, okay, this is what your assessment criteria is. It's not going to change. This is what you have to work towards. And I was like, you can do anything you want in between these parameters. I don't give a shit. You can fucking do an interpretive dance for your final piece instead of a dissertation. I don't care, but just do it right. And that drives people insane. So Nancy, I think if I was I don't think you're going to take practice-based research methodologies in digital art anytime soon, but
No, but
I think you'd
I think
you'd
I'd
be
have
the person
some
emailing me, and I'd be
yes.
like, this girl.
I'd have
The
some
fuck is
choice
wrong with her?
words for you.
It's like, yeah, it's just like fucking figure it out. Just make something up.
Oh,
Convince me,
no,
seduce
no,
me. Yeah,
no,
fuck
I
it.
hate
That's
it
all
when-
about it.
I hate it when people are like, figure it out. I'm like, I'm gonna slit your throat.
Okay, that's like my whole thing, because it's sort of as soon as someone is like wants any kind of hand holding, I was like, I already told you what the parameters are. Just go off and do whatever it is.
Some of that's Bermuda.
Yeah. Oh, that's so
369.
interesting.
Mhm. I do, yeah. And I know a lot of it is a 3 in Bermuda is very like, I can't stand lack of parameters because I will just swirl in my Bermuda Triangle for the next 48 days and just never get anything done. And
So
I
what
will
is-
just spend all my time there.
What is that swirl? What is that?
Well, part of the Bermuda is that everything gets lost in it and it's not really definable, but I can tell you what I do when I'm swirling. Like, so if I'm trying to write a paper and there are parameters but like not specific, and this is why, by the way, I want to go into a math-based science because there are specific parameters all the time. So if someone tells me to write a paper and I have to figure it out, I will write a whole paper, do all my research, and then completely throw it out and be like, nope, that's not right. That's not what they want, and start over. And then I'll spend like an hour or multiple days writing just the intro because I'm not sure that that's what they want. And then I'll throw that out and then I'll start over. And then I'll choose a completely different topic and do that. And then just like at the end, say, fuck it, and just turn it in.
Holy
Wow.
shit.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
That's why I need math and science.
Yeah.
Because I can't.
See, I am like, I cannot do math. I love science, but for math, I'm like, fuck that. Something that strikes me from what you're saying there is like, you mentioned the swirl, and of course that's compelling, but like where's your inner like decision maker? Like like it's confusing to me when you say that, because it's like, how could you wrote a whole paper, how could you throw it out? Like you're the authority.
Oh,
Like
I'm not the authority. It's the
holy
thing.
shit. Okay. Hang on.
And so I am trying to play to this. I'm trying to form my entire thought process and my entire paper and my entire opinion off of what I assume this outer
Is
entity
wanting.
is wanting. And so if that outer entity ever changes, then my paper needs to change.
Jesus.
Yeah,
that's-
it's stressful.
that's-
School is not
that's-
great.
I'll give you a contrast for my
Mhm.
school, just in the context of school.
Yeah.
But before I do that, I had a question for you, which was like, okay, so like let's pretend that your parameters are super clear, the rules have been made, you know, crystal is, you know, in whatever way that you need them to be crystal. Like, how do you feel in tackling the same problem?
Very confident. And I will at that point create my own like opinion and form my own voice that is truly my own, but I have to have those parameters to work within. And I can write you a 12-page paper with a million citations, no issue, and probably do it in under a day and it'd be great. But I need those parameters.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But also that seems super fucking stressful.
It is. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm nothing like that. Jesus. Okay. Fuck. I don't even know how to contextualize this for you. But so I didn't go to high school. I was, for whatever various reasons, I didn't I sort of stopped. I stopped like traditional schooling when I was like 9. And then I went to a hippie school till I was like, oh fuck, I don't know, like 16. And then I was sort of by myself from that point onwards. And so it wasn't until I never graduated, and the hippie school that I went to, it was like this fucking batshit libertarian nut house in like rural Massachusetts, hence why I speak with an American accent. And like we did whatever we wanted all day long. It was like considered like a democratic learning environment. Yeah, so I was left to my own devices for like 8 hours a day between the ages of, like I said, like 9 and how old? I left there when I was like 16. I just turned 16. Yeah, so whatever, that was fine. And you know, I eventually learned how to read and shit like that. But so by the time I went to university, I was in my 20s because I'd moved back to Europe. I'd moved back to Europe like when I was 17, and I like sort of tried to get into some kind of schooling without really doing it. No, I just partied for years. I'm lying. I wasn't. I was like an absolute fucking nightmare person. But anyway, eventually I was like, oh, I'm like in my 20s. I want to do this, blah, blah, blah. But I don't have a high school degree. There's no fucking way I'm going and doing A levels or anything like that. Like, fuck that. That's bullshit. I'm not going to go and like sit in the sixth form with a bunch of 16-year-olds. That sounds disgusting.
God.
So I ultimately, I met the sort of head of year for a course that I was interested in, and pretty much just said like, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I want to do. Let me in your course. And so I like talked my way into starting this BA at an institute in the UK, and that was great. But like I've still never taken an exam ever in my life. Like it's not something I will ever do unless of course I have to learn how to drive. But like it was like, okay, well this is just what I do, and like that was it. And it was, so I went through university, did all the work, wrote an essay for like the first fucking time, and then like I was just able with zero there wasn't like anyone telling me what to do. There wasn't anyone like around me. I didn't have like what I would now refer to as a support system, but like in my head, like that wasn't even something that could exist. So I didn't even have language to describe what wasn't there, like in my life. But it was like,
Right.
well, I was like, well, I want to graduate. So this is what I'm going to do. And it's like, I just did it. And I don't really know how to explain like why or anything around that. But like I was able to like get a first and then continue on and do masters and then be wherever I am now, not doing a PhD because academia is bullshit and no one should do it. But that's my advice for everyone. But yeah, so like the point what I'm trying to say is like if I was given guidelines by these people who are supposed to be teachers, like the idea of even like acknowledging them as some kind of authority was like so ludicrous to me. They were just like like ridiculous people who were trying to do something, and I was like, well, I can do whatever I want ultimately, and it did pay off for me. But it's just like the idea that I would even have to like function to like a set of rules, it would have only slowed me down. So it's interesting that like what you're saying about like, you know, really wanting very clear objectives to be like laid out when you're being set a task, because I only want to know what like the end goal is. I don't want to know anything else around that. It's just like, oh, okay, this is where we're going. Okay, that's fine. I'm definitely going to veer off in my own direction, but that's cool that that's like the general gist. And
That's
then I do
you're
whatever I
like
want.
that's so foreign to me. You're
Interesting.
like comfortable with that? Like that's where you're
Oh, fuck yeah. That's where I'm
Okay.
most comfortable. As soon as a person's like, excuse me, I'm gonna have to see a
Ma'am?
350 word, you know, introduction for this paper before we can consider it. I'm like, fuck this. I'm not, it's like either you're saying yes or you're saying no. And it's like, I'm
So
gonna write what I want.
so cover letters to CVs are like your favorite thing, I'm sure.
No, you just set a template, you don't think about it. You just do it and then it's done.
It's
Oh,
interesting
man.
that this came up in the last pod that the attachment types in each of the harmonic groups, each of them were doing like a less individuated, like for example, the positive type, like positive types, like 9 was kind of like just coming back to neutral, where 2 and 7 were doing positive a little bit more hardcore, and 4 and 8 being a lot more sure of their negative reactivity than 6 is. So it seems like 1 and 5 are, you know, like more individuated, more separate form of competency, whereas 3 is very much uh, bouncing off more so expectations of, you know, what are the rules and parameters of success.
So very unlike a 3 though.
That's what's so interesting about it. And I sort of wonder what like the answer for someone who's not, you know, burdened in the Bermuda Triangle, like what that kind of approach is. But also, you know,
I think
continue.
we had when we did the type 3 call, one thing that was really surprising to me, we had 2 Bermuda 3s on the call, but we also had a Chad
378.
378 and social blind, and I was just blown away
Sexy.
as to how much she was also tracking expectation. And she was a pole dancing teacher or instructor, but even on the call, she wasn't really wanting to like just come out and say that. Like there was still a lot of like you know, framing it.
Yeah.
And I was just like interested in that because this is probably the most not giving a fuck 3 you can imagine. 378 with social blind, self-pressed sexual, but there was still kind of an inherent socialness there. So I still think there'd still be a huge amount of, maybe with the Bermuda 3s more so swimming in all the expectations and rules, but it's still a huge thing for any 3, social blind or not.
Yeah, it's not particularly fun.
No, it doesn't sound it. It's a bit dreary.
The other thing I was curious to ask you guys was the thing that came up in the last call with Courtney about what each of the harmonic groups are giving up if they let go of their, you know, story so like we talked briefly about competency types, and it just seems the least clear because I can really see what positive types and reactive types are holding on to, but it's not really fully clear to me, like, you know, what would you guys be giving up if you didn't have the subjective sort of pragmatic view on things?
Objective. Yeah.
That's a good question.
One way to ask it would be is what would you be giving up if you were more overtly positive outlook or negative reactive?
Oh, that's it. Thank you. the negation of it is really helpful. If I was positive outlook, rather the way that I sense that stuff is sort of like, it's like being blinded. You have no depth perception. Not to, you know, not to suggest everyone that it's inherently bad, but as a metaphor, I would be losing something very real.
Like your grip on reality almost.
Well, I don't really, I mean, how do I put it? My grip on reality is so loose, let's say, that I definitely, I don't even know how to begin with that. But no, I mean,
Okay.
if I was positive, if I was in a position where I was forced only to like look on the bright side, I would be like blinded by that light. And I find it to be a position which is useful in times, but if relied on too much, you end up sort of snowed in by another layer of delusion.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
so that to me is it's very
Mhm.
harmful, and there's something it's like, the lotus eaters or something. It's like, oh, okay, well, there's a level of like stagnation in a fantasy which is unachievable, but also shallow.
What about
Mhm.
reactive types? How does that hit you?
Ugh. So reactive types. I come from a family of all reactive types. Let me rephrase that. My
Mm.
closest sister in age and both of my parents are reactive types. Uh, ugh, gross. And so logic, rationality, not being a messy bitch. I think that's the one that comes through the most. And like I understand sort of why that is important in terms of, in the same sense that it's important to have positivity on occasion, it's also important to be reactive and actually, take a position that you're like actually, I guess, like invested in or whatever. But for me, yeah, whatever that means.
The way you said
Um,
that.
but like for me, it's another form of delusion. It's all delusion all the way down. It's a strategy that for me seems extra delusional, even though I also know my own position is delusional in its own way. But the idea of reacting in stress and having to like force, I don't know, is it like begging? It seems like I don't know. It seems
Forcing responses.
yeah, there's like a level of desperation which I don't resonate with.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Yes,
to
something I wanted to ask about
go
for
for it.
my competencies is so one of the reasons I think that as a reactive type I go for reaction is because I feel like that there is little to no sense of objectivity anywhere.
Mm.
Um and like I like almost like objectivity is just feels like a secondary or tertiary interpretation of the real event. And one of the things I sometimes, and I think most people who are in relationship with competency type struggle with, is how confident a competency type can feel about what can sometimes maybe be accurate or maybe be totally delusional and made up and fragmentary. And so like have you all experienced where your interpretation, your uh, seeking objectivity has actually led you astray?
I think so. This is coming very much from a Bermuda stance, and I'm very aware of that. So that's why I hesitate to answer. I think I can ignore what I want, and kind of be Pied Pipered if I find someone who I think is objective, who may not actually be that smart. Do you know what I mean?
What about like as a 3 and Bermuda and competency? What about like extreme positivity or
Ugh,
negativity as an engine that could pull you in one direction or the other?
I
Because
hate
it's clear.
extreme positivity.
Okay. And what about extreme negativity? Could that
Um,
pull you in that direction and
Oh,
into clarity about yourself and where you stand?
Extreme negativity can. Extreme positivity only gets me into trouble.
Mhm.
So okay, so let me back that up. I'm saying that after so that tendency comes from like a paranoia that I had, like that I've had as like a whole my entire lifetime. Like if I'm too happy, bad things will happen. That's like a
Mhm.
legit paranoia of mine.
Mhm.
So I don't know if that's competency. I don't know if that's my mental illness. I don't know what the fuck that is. But it's
Mhm.
real fun in therapy. So, you know. Um so extreme positivity I never ever do because it only leads to the possibility of me being very disappointed. And why would I open myself up to being very disappointed when I could just assume nothing good is going to happen and then only be surprised?
Fair.
Right? I think that's very logical. So, that's why I stay away from extreme positivity, because I don't want to feel that loss.
What about
So,
extreme negativity?
extreme negativity, I think, can pull me in some more better directions. Like,
Doesn't it narrow the focus possibly?
it narrows the focus onto like me and what I want. It often leads to more like me focusing on like myself and self-care and that kind of stuff. So it tends to lead to better situations than extreme positivity does.
The irony.
Right? That also might be me turning things to support my belief.
Yeah, you could say
Yeah.
that that's maybe a 3-wing 4 is going to be a little bit neutral negative more so than 3-wing 2 is probably more neutral positive
True.
as
Ooh,
a
I wouldn't
strategy.
well, again. Well, I wouldn't say that, but what the fuck do I know? Apparently a lot. No. I think I mean that's interesting. That there's like a tilt on that, because like in my experience for any form of extreme positivity or any form of extreme negativity, it's irrelevant. It's for me it's the emotive content of either, like let me rephrase that. The emotive intensity of either is such a phenomenal turn off to me that like I can physically sense myself hardening if someone is trying to like sell me something. It could be they're selling me oh, this is the worst thing ever, or like, oh, this is so illuminating, it's the best thing ever. I don't, those are shitty examples, but I like feel myself calcifying in that, and to be like the audacity of another person to try and like tell me how to feel about something is so it's so all encompassing that like I just can't. I don't even have words to describe it.
Yeah, your
Now-
trifix is important because in the conversation as well, because you've got 2 competency types. So.
Yeah.
Oh, fair.
I kind of wonder if like that might be a little bit 6-ish, because I also experience that kind of like, I don't mind extreme negativity in myself, but when other people go into that extreme negativity or extreme positivity, I immediately don't trust them.
Yeah. Well, maybe they could say for the 6-ishness, but I suppose I wanted to make the distinction that for me, it has nothing to do with trust. I don't give a shit. It also really doesn't have to do with whether or not they themselves are a negative or positive, extruder, but it's just the idea of like being invaded by their, or like not invaded, like them trying to sort of make a decision for me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think you've ever met me before, but that's not going to happen. And so, yeah, that's like a huge turnoff for me, is like and I think that's why I have such a potential tension with reactive types. But on the flip side of that is my closest relationships, with the 2 people who I have a relationship with, they're both reactive. So yeah, I know. It's whatever.
How does that balance?
How does it balance? That's an interesting question. I'd say yeah.
It doesn't. It's all fake.
That, like, well, it isn't fake, but it's more like I get a lot, it's a tension point in terms of, it's sort of like, why are you not responding to what I need you to see? And I'm like, well, I see it. I just don't have to respond in the way you need me to respond. It's like, and that's your problem. That ain't my problem.
Yeah. That creates a freedom around like what you can say around like someone like you, which I appreciate. I also get the flip side of those people though, being like, I need you to respond. I have a friend who I feel like has a very similar kind of response method as you. She's like, take it or leave it.
Yeah. And it's not, it's, this isn't going to be happening 100% of the time, but the
Sure.
majority of the time, that's how it sort of goes down.
Yeah.
But,
That's interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, I
I
guess
tried
that's
to
going to
write
be
it
a little
out.
bit more extreme with fives because there's more emotional neutrality there. But I'm
Mm.
trying to pinpoint how that shows up for 3 and 1 as well. I guess for 3, generally they're more caring about what's going to move things forward, what's going to be more productive. So if the emotion that someone's coming with isn't productive, it's going to be, well, why does anyone care about that? So that's more from a assertive type perspective, which is we just need to keep going. So this
Mm.
is a waste of time, like Courtney's husband said to her at some point. Whereas type ones are a little bit more like, that sort of integrity, rightness in the body. And I could see them just being disgusted by the messiness of reactive types, where this is too, it doesn't really fit the structure of the rightness of the way I feel this is supposed to be. I mean, I briefly dated a sexual one, and the objective stance definitely can feel colder than 8 does, because even as much as 8s can be separated from their heart, the reactive type thing makes 8s feel a lot more real to people. Like,
It's a
Um,
hotter
yeah,
energy as opposed to cold.
right. So the 1 energy can come off very cold because it's well, in comparison to myself or 8s, because it's a little bit more about the neutral emotional stance of what's right. And so getting a rise out of a 1 or a 3 probably isn't going to work.
So on that topic, what gets a rise out of you, Jesse?
Oh, Jesus. What gets a rise out of me?
Nothing.
Completely emotionally locked down. No, just
As
kidding.
if. Oh, so I have this place called Friend Jail. And you would think,
I love that it has a name.
of course, it has a name. Well, it really should be like Friend Gulag because they're never fucking coming back. But it's there's I'm judge, jury, and executioner in there, and
Sure.
it's how to explain it. So what gets a rise out of me? My vanity is like barely allowing me to communicate about it, but I'm gonna like push through the dread, because what's better than public humiliation, right? But yeah, so what gets a rise out of me is if one has agreed to do something with me and we show up to do the thing, and then this person isn't actually present. Now, what I would like to clarify in that is that presence in the sense isn't in any kind of like, ultimate being, but like is my subjective concept of what I think attention is. Because it takes so much effort for me to go out of my way to make time for someone that, like, if I don't feel like it's mirrored back at me and that they're like with me, all it does is like activates this echo chamber of like there is no ness, like there is no me. This is all illusionary. Like this person has an idea of me which has nothing to do with my existence, and of course it's definitely like fucking not real, but it can feel real. So when I think a person is like not really making an effort to see something which I am also not showing them, which is that's a fucking Pandora's box of nightmare, but in the sense that like that's my fault. Like I made that happen. So that can piss me off if I just feel like, ugh, it's like I've wasted my time making an effort and it's just for nothing. But yeah, and yeah, so that's something I guess it can get it right. Oh well, let me rephrase it though. They'll never fucking know because they go to friend gulag. So like all they hear is like the sweet scream of silence. Like they don't get
So basically
anything from
what
me.
you just heard, you want them to hear now.
Oh my God. Well, I've never thought of it that way, Nancy, but now that you put it
And you're welcome.
holy shit. Yeah, okay, fine. So I'm I'm my
Called
own
out.
personal Stalin. Yeah. But yeah, okay, so I push that on other people. And then it's just stupid shit. It's just stupid fucking shit that people do. It's just gross to me. And it's just but does it get a rise out of me? I don't know. I can't really remember. Oh,
Too busy being efficient.
well, no, too busy improving efficiency.
There you
Ooh.
go.
There we go.
Setting
But,
new standards.
Actually, I wanted to circle back. I wanted to go back to talk about what I forced Nancy to talk about on like when you're, the structures of being competent or whatever like lead you astray. And I wanted to clarify that like in my experience, I have found that one of the negative aspects of that can do, efficiency train is that you can get locked into it, or I can get locked into it. And when I get locked into it, I will literally run my body into the ground, like because it's not something I'm considering, because I know conceptually that I am capable of this, and I know that I can't be stopped. But what I know has very little to do with reality.
Have you ever been stopped when you're on that train?
A number of times, including actually I was on a literal train in Berlin when it happened, which is funny. I was at this point in time, I was going through a number of incredible stressors in my life, including like, actually I'm not going to explain them because it doesn't really matter, but I was very large and I was very in charge, but it was above my material capacity and my emotional capacity, but intellectual capacity I could have kept going forever. However, the way it stopped me is I had like an intense psychosomatic experience of, I was on a train in Germany at a sort of festival that I was that I was at, not like an arts thing, and I stood up and the entire cartilage of my right knee twisted and broke. Like yeah. And it was the sensation was like having, like, if you sorry to all the vegans, if you grab a chicken wing and twist it off.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Oh, I'm actually I'm just so you know, I'm stopping myself from discussing the visceral additions because I don't want to
Keep going. You can keep going.
No,
Oh, I
you can
know.
go if
It
you
was
want.
it
I
was
mean,
fascinating. It was fascinating. I could
Torture.
feel inside my own body like a complete rising immediate numbness and loss of consciousness that spread everywhere all at once. And I had like this sort of like white hot heat of understanding that like my conscious mind had snapped from my physical body and I was moving, and my meniscus was completely shredded. I could not, it was trapped at like 45 degrees. All I did was stand up on a train. there was nothing else involved. I was thankfully with a friend, although I don't speak German, so that was a nightmare. But I was with a friend and she sort of had to hold my hand as I like hopped. Apparently I can like barely remember this. I hopped to like try and sit down and she was like, "Hey bud, what just happened?" And I was like, no, everything is perfectly fine. And she was like, "You're going unconscious." And I was like, "No." I was like in complete denial. I was like, "Well, no, we'll get off at the next stop." I was like trying while going in and out of consciousness to explain what was going on. But yeah. And so that physical experience of literally standing up and my leg going out, that was like the physical manifestation of everything I was not addressing, both in my body and in my emotional landscape. So I'm competent until I'm not competent.
Is your knee still fucked up?
Oh yes, and the greatest part is that that year, it was at the beginning of the year. I was like, you know what I'm gonna do this year? I'm really gonna learn how to dance.
Oh no.
Oh god.
Yeah. I was like, ooh, because I love dancing. But yeah, no, my sort of fucked up. I've got like 40%. What's that word?
Cartilage.
Cartilage, yeah. And so like I can't do the things that I want to. But I walk. I don't have a limp. I'm acceptable. I can dance to some extent. but it took about like 18 months of recovery.
Ah, that's fun.
Yeah, but it was, that's not including all of the intense other stuff that came
Teachings,
with it.
yeah.
But what the point that I'm trying to say is that like at that point in my life, I was so fixated on the ability to do things that I was unable to acknowledge the the limitations that I was faced with.
You were unbending, and so
Mm.
you were forced to be bent.
Yeah.
60 million%.
So, in a type like 5 that is introverted generally, what's emerging through these competency types for me is just the emphasis on doing in a certain way, or progress of one kind or another. And so, like, how's that come together in 5? Like, is there an emphasis on progress or functioning, or how does that work or square?
Ooh, that's interesting. Um, so my concept of progress is not based on any type of external flags.
Mhm.
Um, I know where I assume that I want to be if I'm developing something. And then I get there and it's somewhere else. And when it comes to functioning, I don't consider myself to be a particularly functional person out in the world.
Mhm.
Um, I think I'm good at establishing a meat suit that allows me to navigate it in a way where it seems, if you look long enough, you'll see the zipper, but most people don't look long enough.
So,
Um,
like, as a 5, like, what do you feel like you're attempting? Like, what is the like? It seems like there's kind of a goal orientation of one sort or another. Like, how do you experience that?
oh, that's weird because it's goal. Um, that's like almost something that's not really communicable. The goal is like an idea.
Mm,
It's like I guess the feeling of it is like, oh, I wonder what, and then I wonder until I don't have to wonder about it, and then
mm,
I
mhm,
keep the wonder, and then I move on to the next thing. Oh, rather, the best thing about wondering is that it just generates more wondering. So
mhm,
so yeah, if you can get the momentum going of like, where does that go? Where does that go? What's coming up from this? That's very addictive. Um,
mhm,
but I wouldn't really say that there's like a goal or a purpose outside of the experience of it itself.
mhm. But the
And I
wondering is
say,
like a generative,
yeah,
directional
exactly.
sort of. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. But that could just be what I'm consciously able to process from it. There could be an unconscious goal, which I'm not, mm, you know,
Sure.
tapping into.
No, but I relate to that. The wondering pulling me, but
Mm,
you know, I have a 5 wing and a 5 fix, but
mm.
the directionality that I was sort of feeling is not really my thing, not really my home turf. So it's kind of interesting to parse out.
Explain what you mean when you said directionality.
Well, like I said, it's like, the wondering in a sense is providing a direction or a
Yeah.
movement, right?
Mm.
Yeah,
And
completely.
whereas I kind of the image that I get from reactive is almost like God, what is that thing when you see in the ocean, effervescence, where there's like a little bit light in the ocean, in like ocean
Yeah,
creatures? Yeah, it's like an effervescence in the
bioluminescence.
dark. It's like a location, so it's
Mm,
it's there's less of a it's more like, to me, it feels like seeing how things are, whereas what I'm hearing from competency sounds a little bit like seeing how things are, from objective point of view, so that something can be accomplished or realized or pursued.
I'm wondering if
I
it connects into pardon me, John, with discovery, right? Is if you're
Right, right.
wondering and you're wondering, and then there's an end point that's a possible, at least a discovery.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's, yeah, good. I think
Yeah.
that's exactly right.
yeah, I would agree because really the wandering, wandering, it reaches like this point where you will find something which you did not know you had buried there.
Yes.
And getting that point is like the finest ecstasy I could ever describe. To have that kind of that sudden, um I'm like visualizing in my head like actual sand moving away. But to discover something which maybe you've passed over a same place like 1,000 times, but for whatever
Ooh.
reason, your presence there like stimulates the environment. So something emerges that was hidden from you, but perhaps it wasn't hidden from you because, do you have this sort of I don't know, potential magnetic relationship with this concept? Are you drawn to it or are you drawing it to you? I don't know.
Mm.
That's
But it's
really interesting to hear. I just suddenly started, as you were saying that, thinking
mm,
of that in terms of attraction and chemistry, and over the years, like my own, like looking at attraction from a five fixed point of view of, there's a sense of trying to discover what real attraction is or real chemistry is, and trying to find this little kernel of, maybe every year I'm sort of peeling back the layers on what that means. And I'm always at the same time wanting to discover something about the attraction or chemistry that you couldn't have put together,
mhm.
even as you're trying to put it together
Mm.
or trying to discover it. And where for me as an eight, as a reactive type, it doesn't seem real unless it was something that I couldn't have imagined could have happened.
Yes. But I have to add in terms of like abstracting the goal, like a lot of the time when I've had these minor epiphanies over whatever it is that I'm focused on at the time, um, there is no way that I could have imagined where I've come.
Yeah.
And that in itself is like the sweet spot, is to get to a place where all of that sort of that effort or drive or like the exhaustion which comes with pushing yourself forward, um where it sort of it evaporates around you and it no longer seemingly exists because you found yourself in this state of figuring something out or seeing something in a way that you could have never imagined prior to that exact instant. So yeah, it's mystical.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's interesting, the kind of like the getting somewhere thing, just in contrast to like it's making me explore my own shit. But
Mm,
the fourth thing is sort of like there is a timeless identity or a timeless, yeah, like real self that is somewhere that I'm just trying to deepen a connection with rather than sort of unlocking or extracting the discovery, the insight, the new thing. And it's sort of
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I think it's funny also because I'm trying to explain it in like terms of like a location, but it's so there is no location.
Hmm.
It's the thing. It's always there, but it isn't because it's not there until the observer is there. Anyway,
Right. Right.
yeah.
It's more abstract space with five, theoretical
I,
space or something.
yeah, I mean, yeah. Like
Right.
I don't know how to apply any of this into concrete reality except,
Right.
by forcing minions to do some kind of symbolic thing which might represent an aspect of whatever it is that I've experienced internally, but really it's just a facsimile. It can never be what I've actually figured out. It can only be a
Mhm.
model of it.
John, I was going to ask if do you had anything to say about like the type one version of this? I know Mary Cloud's your close friend.
Yeah, well, I think it's finding, deciphering, and creating structure to reach an aim, to reach an ideal. So it's not like an accomplishment or an achievement like a three, but there is some sort of project or mission that the one is usually holding to or on. It's like, I mean, it was hilarious seeing Mary the other week where she's like full blown communist now, and
Mhm.
which is so great. Like
Congratulations.
yeah, it was funny. Like, this is my good friend Mary. She's a one, and I remember maybe 3 years ago, like sort of having a introductory socialism conversation, and now she's like an organizer in New Orleans and stuff, and it's like fucking awesome. So anyway,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's like there is an ideal to strive toward, and I think that's where that's the one angle on competency.
Yeah, there's a polar thing to me with one and five where one is doing, one is abstract also on one level, but it's theoretical or it's about principle, right? Which is like an invisible, right? But it's more about sort of macro universal principle or something, or governing humanity or bringing order to humanity. Whereas 5 is, sort of coming into the micro, right? And finding the atomic truth or something, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like what's really there? What can be
Yeah.
there? Like if we dig and dig and dig, what's happening? What's
Yeah.
happening below
Yeah.
the surface of what's there? Yeah, I think it's interesting because I don't know very many ones or any. Now that I
Ones
can
are
think of
rare.
it.
Ones are
They're
pretty
fucking
rare.
rare.
Yeah.
Also,
Mhm.
I'd have to know people.
Not
get
an
there.
option. Not an
Yeah,
option.
I mean, whatever. But
Think positive.
oh my god, Jesus.
Manifest it into the
Oh,
universe.
I will scream at you. I will.
I
scream at you.
hate when people say that. It drives me insane.
Just manifest it.
Yes, it's a manifestation.
Just breathe into it.
Mm.
So is the assumption that the competency type's making that, or the over assumption is that we can always move things forward, that we can always make progress? Is that what's going on?
Not for me. I think Nancy, is that more of a 3-ish thing for you?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
that resonates with me.
So what would be the over assumption for all three, that they're all over assuming about situations?
To me, there is a quality about the competency types that it is in all three of them. It's like a machine that is just going to keep going in whatever direction it is. I mean, it may not be about worldly outer accomplishment, but it's going to keep sort of ticking away, and it's partly because it's not subject to the ups and downs of positive and negative.
Yeah,
I don't know if that rings true.
I think that's like a fair analysis.
Mhm.
I also I feel the need to point out that this sense of competency or what have you, it isn't all encompassing. Like there are definite areas of my life where I feel like a fucking crazy person, like messy bitch, like gross. And I'm critical of that, if you couldn't tell from my tone. But the other thing is it is still a delusion. The
Sure.
idea of being that machine or whatever, or even, oh, if I absorb all of this information, it's going to whatever enrich me, or like there's some kind of delicious discover or whatever. Like that's maybe not. But one of the things, just as like an example of the delusion, I've held in my mind, it's less strong now that I'm a crone, but I've held in my mind, especially when I was younger, not only like I'm gonna go and do whatever the fuck I want, wherever the fuck I want to do it, which was whatever, that's something else and bizarre, but like I truly believe, almost to the point where it wasn't like even like a verbal manifestation of belief inside of me, but it was just like this belief of like, if tomorrow, for whatever reason, I was tasked with having to like run a nuclear power plant, just immediately, for whatever reason, I have to do this, I could do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what? Like, have you met me? Would you put me in charge of a nuclear power plant? But I genuinely, too, like almost without question, believe like I could fucking do that. Like,
And
I'd find a way.
yes, I 100% relate with that. And the flip side of that is that when you are, or when, at least for me, when I am messy in parts of my life and not like accomplishing what I should be or could be accomplishing, I'm very much aware that it's my fault, because I can do whatever I put my mind to.
I agree with that completely.
Mm-hmm.
Especially as I have like this double blow of like, not only is it my fault, but I am acutely, distinctly, unquestionably aware of the absence of anyone else who would be able to support me in that.
Yep.
One angle on all of this is our roast name for 135, robo celibate, right? So it's like you're just going to keep going. You're not going to get distracted by non-celibacy, right, which represents all the mess, which in some sense the mess could be iterated out as, the highs of positive outlook and the lows of, hate fucking, right, or something, right? Right?
Hey,
So
there
it's
is
like,
this is a no critical zone for hate fucking.
Yeah, 100% down
Right.
for hate fucking. Hate fucking's the best. Yeah,
That's
but
gonna
I
be
think
the lead-in for the episode.
yeah, but I think that is the over assumption, or whatever you called it, Emika, of 1, 3, and 5.
So that must be hard
Yeah.
to, in terms of blaming yourself for anything that's not working in your life, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah. Like the
but-
inner voice is real loud on that
Mm,
for me.
yeah, totally.
Yeah. I don't know about, like, for me, I have that like image thing going on.
Yeah.
and you've also got superego with 6.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
Do the right thing.
Ugh, as if there's a right thing.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
That's really
fun.
interesting. I guess I'm trying to think related to reactive types in terms of what do I blame myself for? I guess because 8 is an expansive type, I do think that I wouldn't be coming from that power nuclear plant example from a place of competency, like that I could figure it out or anything like that. I just think that if you put me in a situation that maybe I don't know how to do something, but I can make it happen. Just
you can push to make it.
I can make someone do it.
Yes. I resonate so strongly with that, because it's like, well, I'm gonna fucking make it happen. Like,
Right.
like somehow. Like,
It doesn't mean I'm the smartest person. It just
No.
means that I'm the most determined and stubborn asshole there is.
Yeah. Yeah.
he beat me into being a nuclear fuel rod technician.
I didn't want to.
Like
Yeah.
I'd be able to walk
Burns.
into the room and size up everyone and be like, okay, this is the person who's going to do this. This is the person going to do this.
Mhm.
And I don't do anything, but I know how to make the shit work.
Yeah.
I'm your little nerd.
Exactly. You need a bunch of minions.
Yeah.
I think that's the perfect setting for an 8.
Yeah. This is dictator of the universe.
Basically.
What did they do in Chernobyl where they were like, go look in the reactor core, see if it's still working?
God.
Yeah.
God.
3.6
delicious.
Ruckins.
Ugh.
Comes back with half his face falling off.
Yeah.
It's
Oh
fine.
God. That's one of the best things I've seen. I think I watched that whole thing twice.
Yeah, I
You
just
should watch it.
Yeah,
Saturating in death.
we were going to talk
Mm.
about doing a whole episode or something on Chernobyl. It's been a
Yeah,
while
we
since
should do
I
that.
need to see it again.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
tap out on that one. You guys
It-
have fun.
It's big 5'8" energy.
Do you not enjoy large scale global
Death
disaster?
and destruction? No, I don't,
No,
because
not
I
a little?
fully believe that can happen, and I'm like, it's gonna
Yes.
happen in my lifetime. So
So
why
it
will.
not
happened.
make a
It
movie
happened.
about
Yeah. It already has happened. Well, no, you're younger than me, I think, but it's happened in my lifetime. I was born in the same year.
So is Chernobyl actually about Chernobyl? It's not about
Yeah.
like what could happen in the future.
It
Yeah,
happens.
no, it
Oh,
happens.
well, then
What
I might be
happened.
okay with it. I might be okay with
It's
But it's big
fascinating.
5'8", that show.
it. Yeah.
oh, good. That's more attraction.
Hardcore.
Speaking of being messy, that's something I wanted to touch upon, is that like occasionally in my competency delusion, I have like the idea of like, ooh, like how messy am I gonna get? But not from a negative perspective, but a kind of like, ooh, I could, you know what I could do? I could just fucking go off the rails. In a kind of like playing with the idea of it. Does it happen? Yeah, sometimes it happens. It was quite fun. But it's also like, I think part of that is like, how deep into these radioactive waters can I go before coming back up?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, how close to this thing, which will potentially destroy me, can I get?
Mm-hmm.
And then I get to come back from it. And then what if I don't? And then I get to come back from it.
I do relate to that to an extent.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can see, for example, like getting with the type 1 was a little bit of surprise. Not a little bit, a big surprise for me. But I could see part of the one thing of wanting to be involved with something messy, because it's like the belief is I can figure out a way to not be affected or by this messy thing that I'm getting involved in, how much of a mess that I'm pushing away from, but also attracted to,
Yeah.
can I deal with and still be functional?
Exactly. There's like an endurance aspect to it. It's
Yeah.
like, how much can I take?
Mm-hmm. Until I break.
Yeah.
And then what is
Then you
that break
learn.
gonna look like?
Oh, bed rest.
I feel like there's a polarity going on with the reactive types and like with positivity, where it's like, well, I'm going to give this hopefulness a chance, and because maybe I'm not going to be burned by the reality that everything sucks. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it's like there's this dance between, maybe I'll rely on hope this time, and instead of the usual like doom and gloom.
In the back of my head, I'm like, fools.
Like being negative all the time gets old too. It's like,
Fuck yeah. And it's exhausting and boring.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's the ups and downs of positive and negative, and so it's what makes it machine-like to do that 1-3-5
Mm-hmm.
triad.
And I can. This might be the 3, but I can like switch it on, and just be like, okay, well, I have to get this done. Like, this is gonna sound really weird, but I have a lot of like fear around people in my life dying, and so like I'll oftentimes imagine like what my reactions will be, and every time I'm like, yeah, my first reaction is going to be, well, I got to show up to work the next day and just keep doing until I absolutely break, because I have to shove it down, and I have the ability to shove everything down if I need to, and I'm just like, goodbye. Doot, 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 doot.
Yep.
Oh,
Mm.
you know what? I was curious about how competency shows up in a romantic space, because that's an inherently messy
Not
space to be in.
competent.
Right. But I
Yes.
mean, I have a little bit to say about my own experience with dating threes. But I'm curious to hear, how has that been a challenge, or navigating romantic space but with a competency lens?
Oh.
What's up, Jesse?
Well, how does that go? Okay, so it might surprise some of you to discover that in relationships, I can be a little bit. What's the word I'm going to choose to use this? Dominant. That's the word I'm going to use to choose
Just
this.
a little bit, just a little bit.
Just a smidgen, just a little bit. And what I've discovered through that is a lot of people like that idea, and then the reality bothers them. But it doesn't bother them in the way that you think it would. And when I mean dominant, it's more like, like, I know what I'm fucking doing. I know what I want. Obviously, it's open for discussion. What we're going to do, you have a relationship with someone. It's it's a dialogue. But I also like direct stuff. I say, like, hey, what is this? Like, I'm sort of instigate things a lot more traditionally in my relationships than other people. And when I'm with someone who can match me in that, chef's kiss, perfect, love it, fucking whatever. But what I've experienced, and this is with dating nines,
I was just going to say 9s.
Fuck.
It all goes
First
back
off,
to 9.
They fuck. It all goes back to 9. Anyway, but what I've discovered is that they like absolutely adore it at the beginning, right? It's like, oh,
they always do in the beginning.
They always do at the beginning, right? And they're just like, oh, and there's like, it's like puppy dog eyes and sort of like, I guess, a sense of comfort, etc. I don't even, well, I say I don't even know, and that's whatever. It's a whole other issue. But when it comes to like, when it comes down to like I suppose the more, when things get tough, my experience has been like, I am so much tougher that it suddenly becomes this dynamic of like, of like you're so demanding and critical. It's like, well, we agreed to do something. You're not keeping up your part of the bargain. And it's like, I have I've done something I don't do with people, which is I have exposed what one of my needs are, or more than one of the needs, if that it is. And the fact that you're like, I don't know,
not meeting
Yeah.
expectations.
Well, it's not meeting expectations, but it's sort of like, it's a bit of a letdown. But this is just more like, this isn't to do with exclusively sexual relations, which is like way different, but like to do with like sort of romantic partnerships, etc. There's like a tendency, because I'm so clear in what I would like. And I've had people who are sort of like, yeah, I want that too, because I guess my enthusiasm for it or whatever is like infectious, or I assume that they also, if they tell me something, that's what they want, and I'm not
Which
gonna
is
like
not the
fucking read
case
their
with
mind.
nines.
Yeah, and I had to learn that the hard way, and I was like, what the fuck is this? It was just like confusing, so confusing to me, because it was like,
The
how can a person
parameters
not
shifted.
know? Yeah, but it's like, how can a person not know? How can you not know? Well, they just don't fucking know. But and of course, what with prolonged isolation, etc. I'm a born again virgin, so what do I know about relationships? Nothing. But Nancy, how does it come across for you? Because you seem more fluid in a way.
Yeah, I think I am to an extent. I definitely would lay out, like at the beginning of my current relationship, I laid out like, here's what I want, here's what I'm looking for. And like, I was always very clear with my partners about like, this is what I want, this is what I'm looking for. I don't want kids, don't tell me. Like, like I would have that conversation like right off the bat. I'm like, I am bi, I am a sex worker, I don't want kids. Like, like if you're not cool with that, fucking leave. So like I definitely like appreciate, or I definitely set my parameters at the beginning, because I appreciate when people do that for me. So therefore I do it for other people, and then get frustrated when people don't do that for me.
Yes.
I think there's more of an expectation, like where it shows up for me in relationships is there's an expectation of someone else approaching their life in a competency format. And people don't do that unless you're a competency type, right? And I can get really frustrated with the like lack of brevity with like how long people take to make decisions, and how, like for instance, a big sticking point with my 9, who is now my fiance, so we made it through this, but it was definitely one of the hardest times, was when like he was taking a while to leave his job, and I just didn't understand. I'm like, then just leave. You hate it, they treat you shitty, just leave. And he's like, no. Because it's not the way he functions. But for me, as of a competency type, when things stop working, you cut them off. There's no reason to put any more time into it. When things stop working, you were done. And so when people don't function that way, I can get really frustrated really quickly, because I'm like, well, I don't care if you're going to complain to me. You're not doing anything to fix it. So fuck off.
I found it really interesting, even from the perspective of sexual types. I had a thing with a sexual 3. And one of the really interesting things that came up very early on was that she wanted to know what my 5-year plan was.
What?
And I've never had anyone say that to me, but I also admired it, because it was, this is kind of like 3 energy, and you should think about your long-term goals and where you're headed. But she was already thinking about us together, and our lives together, and she was concerned that we weren't aligned in the same direction. So it wasn't unfounded that she was bringing that up, because she wanted to figure out, like, are we going to work out or not? And she was already talking about like she wants someone who is on a similar financial level, because she's making pretty good money. She wants to stay home and have kids. So there's this real like, I interpret it as maybe we're experiencing some very strong chemistry, and you're trying to shut it down with this bullshit that I don't give a fuck about. Where on the other side, it's like, this is important adult stuff that should be discussed if you're talking about the practical aspect of putting a relationship together and building a life together. You should talk about that stuff. So I was torn on one hand, is like, this is sensible. But on the other hand, is like, this is totally unreasonable from my perspective.
This is sensible. Fuck that.
I am just confused at that, because for one reason. The first one is like, why would anyone ask about my business? That's the first thing that would come up. But like the second is like, it's none of your fucking business. It's like, it's my 5-year plan. But I don't have one. So the idea of having a plan or thinking that far ahead, but is that my type? Is it the fact that I think the world is going to end? Is it because I don't give a shit? Is it because so far winging it has worked out for me? I don't know. But
my thought was, if you have a 5-year plan, you're living a very boring life.
Well,
Yes.
the 5-year plan. So I also did that to my current partner. And I was very worried at the beginning because he didn't want to move to Europe with, like, he was like, no, I don't want to leave America. Now we have a full-blown plan to move to Europe, and he is all in and all excited about it. So that's shown me that things can change. But it's not so much that they need to have a 5-year plan that exactly matches up. It's that I need to know that their 5-year plan isn't complete polar opposite to mine. Like, it's
Yes.
not. I need to make sure that you aren't like, I want my woman to birth a child and stay home. Like, you know, I need to like make
Right,
sure
right.
that they are meshable.
Yeah. And so on that level, I respected it, because it was kind of like saying, if we're going to get, you know, I respected the fact that she was even thinking about that, because that
Right.
meant that she was thinking about me in a serious way.
Mm.
And so it's kind of like, let's have a conversation about the possible parameters of us as a couple.
Mhm.
And I'd never had anyone, you know, bring that up so early, but I was more thinking of, well, we got to figure out if we even really gel or like each other first before we start
Mm-mm.
thinking about a 5-year plan, because this is like
Mm-mm.
still in the first couple of dates. But it was like, for
Don't waste my
three,
time. Don't
for
waste
3,
my
it's
time.
like, we got to figure this shit out now before we even get to the messy fucking parts of,
Wow.
you know, getting to enmeshed. We need to figure out if this could even work.
Yeah,
That's-
because then I'm going to get emotionally involved, and then I'm going to find out that you want me to have your baby, and fuck that, when we could have had
Yeah,
this
fuck that.
conversation 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I
Okay,
felt that it
so-
was like an emotional wall, in a sense, to say that I'm starting to have feelings for you, and before I let this go any further, we need to figure out if this is working. But because I'm not going to go crazy for a person whose life path is not in line with where mine is currently going. So let's have this competency conversation as a way to sort of shut down the chemistry. That's the way it felt to me, anyway.
Hmm.
Yeah, that, I mean, like, when you describe it like that, logically it makes sense to me that certain people would want to approach it in that way. But I guess for me, because I'm not sort of focused on those sort of long-term stuff, like, that doesn't, whatever the questions that I would have and have had with people who I'm interested in are like much more to do with more, I suppose, like abstracted, the word isn't values, but it's like interests, and like, can they
Mhm.
sustain interest? Like, do we resonate on like, well, 2 things, like, do we resonate on like being interested in the same things, like in each other's bodies, in each other's desires or needs, in like the kind of ways we approach things. For me, a big one is like, I will probably, you know, like, I'm not going to fucking talk to you every day. Sometimes I will, but most of the time, no. So like those kind of, I guess it's, I hate the word lifestyle compatibility or something like that.
Yeah.
That's not, that's imperfect, but
Some kind of
But yeah.
parameters.
I guess the parameters, but also, yeah, I suppose they are parameters. I just don't see it as like that formal. Although if someone said that to me, I think I'd be so fucking impressed. I'd be like, ooh, this is really interesting. Like, what's this about? Like how did they reach that point where they were thinking about this? And like, what are their, I would become more attracted to like what their ideas are, because it demonstrates this kind of like imaginative quality, which is attractive to me. So I wouldn't necessarily instigate that, but I'd be like, and yeah, because I the thing that I've noticed in relationships is like, for as like you know, like commanding as I can be, I don't really like it. Like, I don't really want to be like this way. It just happens. And I would kind of, and a lot of, most of it, I would kind of prefer another person who can meet me or even expand beyond that. So
Mhm.
someone who's like very forthright. They don't have to be a competency type. It's not like, oh, you know, that, but it's someone who's like, not like, I suppose, secretly resentful or shitty about like, you know, having to make decisions or like be
Mhm.
direct.
You've just blocked all the 9s.
Yeah. And it
I
sucks.
I was
They're
just
sexy,
thinking that
sexy
my
people.
I was just thinking that my 9 is actually really good at that.
That's great.
It-
And
Yeah,
this
then,
no.
has
you
got
know,
So fuck you, David.
this
No,
has
I
just
mean,
got me
I am too with romantic relationships. It is
Yeah, I
different.
know.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's just getting me thinking as in terms of like the decision making for competency types as to the parameters of if this is going to work or not. And I'm just thinking of how that what are reactive types doing, in terms of their
Mm,
romantic decision making. And I'm just thinking about myself, because if I'm not thinking necessarily from is this going to work, it's more like if I want it to work, I'll figure out a way to make it work, or we'll get through it, however that may be. uh, but what am I thinking about in terms of determining if an attraction is working or not? I think it's more of, I mean, it's always going to come back to realness. Like, how real is this attraction? How
right.
real is this dynamic? Is the dynamic sort of generating realness for me? And um, I'm tracking how real it is for the person, not just how real it is for me, but is this actually rattling some cages for this person? Um, so there's a level of like tracking how much I'm being affected and they're being affected. Because maybe as a reactive type, that's what I'm, how much am I being provoked and how are they being provoked by what's going on? And if it's really strong, then this is really a real attraction, and then everything else can be figured out. What about you, John?
Yeah, I mean, that's similar to me. Part of it, I think, being my type, social blind, and 4 or 5, and with 2 rejection types, like, I have a very hard time, like, receiving that somebody is really into me
Yes.
and knowing that they care about me and things like that. And so I think what you might be calling realness, like, there's a certain way that I need my heart to be affected,
Hmm.
and I need to see it affects their heart,
Yeah.
that I'm affecting their heart. And I mean, yeah, on top of that is, like, lots of chemistry and desire and, like, sexuality and things like that. But, like, is the sexuality with a sense of, like, yeah, like, we're transforming it through our, like, infusing through one another. Um,
Hmm.
that's where it hits me.
Yeah, it doesn't seem real to me unless I feel like, I mean, I can see if someone's being affected, but they're allowing that, um, they're being provoked by me and the chemistry, but they're allowing themselves to be affected. And um, which is going to, it's like a wound. And a wound eventually gets healed and you get new skin, and this chemistry is creating new skin. That's what it feels like. And it's alive. And so when I hear about like, like dealing with the competency type who's talking about 5-year plans, it's like that's sensible, and I totally agree that's important. But it just takes away from this thing, this feverish whatever thing that's like we're just bubbling with potential transformative energy because we're provoking each other in some kind of way. So it's just a very different approach.
When I hear that, my brain goes immediately to, well, that's not very useful.
Oh, see, I have a different approach. I think that it is very useful in the sense that, like, like, being able to see how you really can potentially make an impact. And by that, I don't the word impact. I'm thinking more like pressing into something and it's left there. Like, it's that instead of a wound, it's the it's
Impression.
yeah, well, it isn't yeah. I can't think of the exact word in English, so I won't say it aloud. But yeah, it's a sort of chasm that you could both fall
Mm.
into. But yeah, I think I can get wrapped up in the potential of a thing. And if I don't somehow tether it to, like, actually checking in with the other person who I'm involved with, it can just
Mm.
become a little bit too imaginary. And I make assumptions on it. But I think something that is probably important to add in terms of the absence of a 5-year plan, et cetera, or whatever that other people seem to engage with, which to me seems insane. Part of the reason it probably seems batshit to me is that while I know technically when I'm with a person, I'm going to be like 100% there and with them. And, like, it's super, super important for me to be able to, like, like, put all of my attention and get that mirrored back, and then in that kind of like infinite mirror moment discover something else. Like it's like that's so fucking cool to me. But I'm also I've always have like an unspoken exit strategy. I know I can leave at any moment. And it's almost frightening because the completeness in which those chords that we've strung up between like the, you know, the posts of the parameters of the thing that we've created together, those I can destroy in a second. It can just completely be gone. And it's so distinct and whole that like I you know, I'm I am somewhere else, or rather they are no longer in my area of influence, that like, you know, it leaves a mark on me, but it's not something that, it doesn't matter. So like it doesn't matter that it hurts, because the I suppose the actual outcome of that, in knowing that like if I have been touched in a way which has activated this evaporation, the pain of the absence is going to be so much more bearable than sustaining whatever kind of horrifying connection that we could have had. So I think that's why I don't have a 5-year plan.
So it's a certain kind of efficiency nonetheless, what you've described.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
You know,
This is great.
Yeah,
Cool.
this
great.
is really cool.
All right. Well,
Thanks for having me, guys.
thanks for coming
Yeah.
on, Jazzy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks.
Good
Good
times.
to have you.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
All
I'll
right.
talk to you guys later.
All
Yeah. Have fun musing on grief in the background, everybody.
Oh, yeah. We're on it.
Take
All
care.
right.
right,
Bye.
thank you.
Later.
Bye.
Bye.